Okay. All right. You ready to go? All right. Well, it's wonderful to be here at Women's Legal Service with Nadia Bromley, but also Sue and Lloyd Clark from Small Steps for Hannah. They are all tremendous advocates for victims of domestic and family violence and victims of sexual violence. This week, with the release of the Commission of Inquiry report into the Queensland Police Service, we know we need to do even more to support women who are coming forward, and clearly there have been many women who have been let down by the system. We need to make sure that when women come forward to a police station, even if they don't have physical bruises or visible scars, that they are believed and they are supported through the system. And of course, the Commission of Inquiry has given us 78 recommendations to completely transform the culture of the Queensland Police Service through overhauling recruitment and training and leadership at all levels. And of course, this week, the government also released its response to the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force Hear Her Voice, report number 2. And we've announced a $225 million reform package to overhaul our criminal justice system, to place women at the centre, to make sure that women are being supported through the system and not getting lost in the system. The $225 million reform package will include upgrades to 81 courthouses across the state so that women can give evidence via video link and not be re-traumatised by the process of giving evidence at court with their perpetrator in the room. It will mean an extensive prevention and awareness campaign in the community about consent education. It will mean more funding for the DPP and their victim liaison officers, a victims commission and a victims commissioner to make sure that they're advocating at a systems-wide level to ensure all of our laws and policies are making sure that women are at the centre of everything that we do. I'm also incredibly proud that the government has announced law reform for an affirmative consent model here in Queensland and criminalising stealthing, as well as changes to the prohibition on naming an accused in sexual assault matters. Those outdated, old-fashioned notions of not being able to name an accused person in these specific cases really is based on rape myths about women making up complaints, and there is no place for that anymore here in Queensland, in our laws, in our systems and in our policies. So an historic reform package. We know that 1 in 5 Australian women will experience sexual assault in their lifetime, yet it is still the most underreported crime. So this package really is about making sure that women feel confident to come forward and confident to be supported through the system. I'll ask Nadia and Sue and Lloyd to make some comments, and then we're very happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Attorney. I'm Nadia Bromley, the CEO of Women's Legal Service Queensland. What does this report mean for women, talking about the Commission of Inquiry? What does it mean for women who are turned away from police stations, who have been dismissed, disbelieved and disregarded? What does it mean for women who have been misidentified as perpetrators and not protected? For them, it means that they are heard and believed. For them, it means that injustices they have suffered that have been unreported and unrecognised have finally come to light. Today is the day that we start to make change, and this is a public reckoning. The thousands of brave Queenslanders who told their story to the Commission of Inquiry were unified in one voice in saying, do better. And that is our expectation of the police as a community. The report contains 78 recommendations, which include a pathway to a better future. And every Queenslander expects to see strong leadership from the police. The report itself is called A Call to Change. The safety of women in this state and the integrity of our justice system depends on the quality of the response to that call. This is the time for strong leadership, for brave leadership, for the police service to come out loudly and clearly. And to those charged with the implementation of the recommendations in this report, I say this: the women of Queensland are listening. Thank you.
Hi everyone, Lloyd and Sue Clark here. We're just very glad to be here and supporting the government and women's legal. This is something that we've been fighting for nearly 3 years now, to have change. and a couple of these changes have needed to happen. And we're very excited about the perpetrator intervention program. I think that's something that has been left aside because we need to prevent this before it happens. So if people out there know family members, friends, even themselves, they see the red flags, they see that they need help. So with this intervention, they're going to get that help. They need to know that they can get help out there. And we're supporting the government all the way. And it's good to see that there is change coming.
And as Nadia said, if women can feel validated and heard and safe to come forward when there's a problem, this means so much to these women. It's unimaginable how they feel and how frightening it is to go into a police station. They need that confidence, and hopefully this will bring the confidence through.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Questions?
Attorney, is Queensland ready for coercive control when you see the reading in that Commission of Inquiry report? Women aren't being believed, they're getting turned away at front desks, DBOs aren't being made, protection orders aren't in place. Is Queensland then ready for stealthing to be criminalised, from an affirmative consent model for coercive control to come in when you see that reading?
The Women's Safety and Justice Task Force was very clear. We needed this commission of inquiry into police, and the government called it because we can't criminalise coercive control. We can do all of the training we like with the Queensland Police Service. If we don't understand the cultural issues at the heart of the Queensland Police Service, then we can't fix them. And that's what this commission of inquiry has done. It is brave governments that hold these kinds of commissions that uncover the ugly and the uncomfortable and the unacceptable behaviour. You have to bring it into the light. You have to let women's stories be heard before you can fix it. So, yes, I do believe that our program of reform in terms of law reform for affirmative consent, for stealthing and for coercive control will be much more successful because of this Commission of Inquiry and because we have accepted their recommendations to overhaul the service.
Some of the recommendations say they're going to take up to 18 months. You're planning to introduce those laws next year. So are you confident that those culture issues will be addressed, will be on their way to being fixed by the time we see these laws passed?
There's a number of key recommendations in the Commission of Inquiry which has asked government to implement within 3 months, and there's some that will take a little longer. We also know from the experience in jurisdictions overseas that have criminalised coercive control, even when the laws are introduced, there still needs to be time to make sure that first responders in the community are aware of those laws. So we will take our time to get this right, but we are still on track to introduce a bill next year into the Parliament, but there will be a long lead-in implementation time, and we will make sure that the implementation of the recommendations of the Commission of Inquiry are also on track.
What will Queensland's affirmative consent model look like? I know that a number of other jurisdictions have. What will it look like for us?
Yeah, so the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force acknowledged that Queensland has already made some great reforms in this space, but said we could go further, and we've accepted that. So the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force said that we need to amend our laws so that consent is agreed to, not just given. It also said that if an accused wants to rely on mistake of fact when it comes to consent, whether or not they did or said anything to determine whether consent was given will be taken into account. And they've also recommended that if a person alleging sexual assault has experienced grievous bodily harm, then they cannot have consented unless the accused proves otherwise. So it's really just, I think, bringing consent laws into 2022, 2023 in line with the community's expectations about what consent and mutual respect in sexual relationships really is about. And I'm very proud that we have accepted that recommendation to modernise our laws.
Can stealthing be, is it a criminal charge at the moment, or is it encapsulated in other criminal charges?
Some criminal lawyers will argue that some form of stealthing is already prohibited by our laws, but we are now, in accordance with the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force, making it explicit that it will be a crime. So if you remove a condom without consent, it is rape. And I think that specific offence sends the message and can be incorporated now into our consent education in schools, because ideally we want to prevent this behaviour from happening in the first place. You can't talk about prevention of sexual assault unless you talk about consent education. And of course, we've got a huge $15 million commitment, and we've already released a whole lot of online resources about consent education for parents as well. But that new curriculum will start rolling out from the first term next year. And we really want to see generational change when it comes to consent and sexual assault.
Was there any discussions about looking at, any person withdrawing contraception without the other person's knowledge, say if you stop taking birth control as well? Is that going to be maybe part of the education program?
Well, look, obviously it all comes back to respectful relationships and communication in relationships. What the Women's Safety and Justice Task Force have recommended is that this should be a specific crime and we should specifically call it out, and that's what a number of advocates like Chanel Contos have also been advocating for.
Out of those recommendations that were accepted, do you think there was one that was the most important for women?
There was 188 recommendations, but I think when you look at them together, having an affirmative consent model along with specialised sexual assault case management in our courts, having an expert panel that can give evidence in court to juries about rape myths, about the nature of domestic and family violence, a pattern of abuse will happen over time. These are the things that will fundamentally mean that women are believed and supported through the system. There are also recommendations, for example, about removing the prohibition of naming an accused before the end of a committal. Those offences, prohibitions in our criminal code, treat sexual assault and rape differently to every other crime. And why is that? It's because these prohibitions were based on rape myths where women, come forward and make up complaints. And as I said, there is just no place for those myths anymore anywhere in our system, and certainly not in our laws. So I was very pleased to see that prohibition be removed.
Some of these recommendations are supported in principle and then some are supported. For the ones supported in principle, are they going to be implemented? Is that a commitment?
Yeah, so I think there's 103 supported in full and another 70-odd supported in principle. And where we've supported it in principle, we absolutely support the intent, but we do believe there needs to be further consultation. So we're going to take that time to consult with stakeholders to get it right.
Just on another matter, if I can ask about affordability of housing in Brisbane, a new CoreLogic report out today shows that Brisbane's affordability is worse than ever, and it's actually the worst in the country. What's being done to address it? You've got floods, you've got people moving up here.
Yeah, there is huge pressure on our housing system. Obviously, at the Housing Summit last month that the Premier hosted, we brought together all of the key stakeholders and NGOs to look at what more we can do to provide affordable housing. I know Minister Enoch, as the Housing Minister, is doing everything she can to make sure there's more social housing in the system, but it is about everyone coming together, the private sector developers and government, to really make sure we're doing everything we can. We've got people moving here. As you said, we've had natural disasters. I know the Premier will be tabling some initial responses to the Housing Summit in the next couple of weeks. So there should be, I think, some really good initiatives that have come out of bringing everyone together to address these issues.
Can I speak to Nadia? Can we just get your thoughts on how prevalent is stealthing at the Women's Legal Service? Do you see that come up quite a lot?
Yeah, look, obviously sexual assault services are probably better to speak on that, but certainly Women's Legal Service is aware of it. And I think people do feel really disempowered because although, as the Attorney rightly said, there may be technically criminal laws that might capture some of that conduct, those aren't known to members of the public, and people can only report what they know are crimes. So it's certainly a very, it is an offence. I can't talk specifically to the prevalence, but it's certainly a very difficult offence for people to deal with, and there's a lot of social stigma associated. So very encouraged that the public conversations will start in that space.
And how needed was Queensland updating our affirmative consent model and bringing in coercive control and also introducing these laws when we have seen it in a number of other Australian jurisdictions?
Look, desperately needed, and it's very encouraging to see such a raft of changes coming forward, and particularly removing some of that very outdated language around carnal knowledge and other things that just have no place in our laws.
Nadia, given the Commission inquiry report has revealed that police in a number of cases weren't really safe within the service themselves, what sort of message did that send to victim survivors out there who might be worried about coming forward?
I'm sure it was very difficult, and I'm sure across the board people identified with the stories that they heard from police, and those were very harrowing, and I'm sure the Commissioner has her work cut out for her to address that. But I think that's what's encouraging to see how that police integrity unit will progress, because I think to have confidence in the service, we need to have confidence that those people are safe doing the difficult work that they're doing.
Nadia, what about this prospect of naming offenders before committal? What's your position on that?
Well, as the Attorney said, the difficulty there was that victims of sexual assault were in a different category to anyone else. Someone who'd had their house burgled or had a common assault perpetrated against them, or an offence that's equally heinous, but perhaps not so personal, weren't prohibited from naming. So I think it was part of the victim blaming that we have often seen, and that rhetoric has no place in this state. So delighted to see that that's being removed.
Was it odd that Queensland was one of the last to hold that position?
Look, laws take different times to evolve in different areas. There are areas in which we are further progressed, and it's just good to see such thorough consideration across the board, so perhaps we can be industry leading and state leading in all those spaces.
And Sue and Lloyd, your foundation issued a statement for supporting Henrietta Carroll. Why do you think that she was the best person to lead the police service through these reforms they need to undertake?
I think, one, as a female, and she is very empathetic to women. She understands what's going on, and I think we need a strong woman to help get this done. And she has implemented, in the short time she's been in the 3 years, she has started implementing changes. And it takes time to get all these changes through, and I think she's doing a good job.
And the other thing too, a lot of this happened before her watch. So give her a chance. We go and change, go for another commissioner, we're just going to start from zero again, aren't we? So she's already tried to start implementing things. Let's give her a good shot at it, I think.
And when you see the findings out of the report, are you comfortable that coercive control can be successfully implemented in Queensland when you see that culture in the police service?
Well, there's so many good police out there. There's only a few bad ones, and it's just a matter of weeding them out. It's like any other workplace. There's always the bad ones in the workplace, so we've just got to get that in, and I think bringing in a private reform is probably the best way to go. So there's not police on police. So with that, it should be good, and yeah, I'd just be great.
The Commissioner has... There are investigations underway into a number of officers in the wake of this report. The Commissioner wasn't able to confirm yesterday, though, whether rapists potentially could still be working in the force. How does it make you feel, Tim?
I think she'll get to the bottom of it. It needs to be looked into. But again, it's got to be proven, and, you know, it takes time to get through all this. But I feel confident if she's aware of rapists in the police force, they will be gone. You can't have that.
You've both ticked off a lot of achievements already in just a few short years. What do you plan? What's your next goal that you're looking to change now that a lot of these reforms are taking place?
To get Australia to listen. Queensland's doing a great job.
New
South Wales are. We can get the rest of Australia on board. That would be amazing.
And the federal government's making a commitment with their initiatives as well. So, I mean, that was a quite achievement. We didn't know much about that at all. And then all of a sudden it came up, and so happy that it's going ahead. And hopefully early next year we'll have Annastacia up and running. So that's, housing for women who are escaping DV, short-term housing. So we'll have 9 units available for women to go into. And also to keep our red flags ad going along, so giving people more education on coercive control. So it's more about education, hopefully.
Will you be travelling around the country as well?
Looks like it. Yeah. We've got a couple of bookings already, so yeah, we might get to see a few of the other states. And the more we can get out there, the more talking. It's still that uncomfortable conversation we don't like having, but if it happens to get Australia all on board, it's worthwhile.
Yeah, the more women see the red flags, or more victims see the red flags and understand the red flags and realise that what's happening to them is a real thing. Because a lot of the time the victim's been gaslighted to believe that they're crazy and that these things aren't really happening. So the more we can keep the conversation going and the red flag campaign going, hopefully victims will come forward because they will understand that, no, it's not them. There is a problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.